What did I learn from the first time replacing the grease in my Max prop? I'll share 5 lessons learned, and each will likely save you effort, money, and time in the event you decide to change your grease in your Max prop. What is a Max prop? Max prop is a brand name for a feathering propeller owned by PYI Incorporated. This is a propeller that orients itself when it's spun in a particular direction to move more efficiently, propelling the boat in the water. This can drive a boat in reverse up to 80% more efficiently versus a fixed propeller. In addition, it supports a neutral, non-drag position for when your boat is moving through the water without the use of the propeller. This neutral position creates extremely little resistance as water flows along the hull axis, and this keeps the shaft from spinning, which saves wear and tear on your shaft, V-drive if you have a V-drive, and the transmission. Why does the Max prop require grease? Grease fills the internal mechanism of the prop to lubricate the surfaces that rotate together, ensuring the blades move freely. This allows the propeller to feather quickly when the shaft stops spinning. The manufacturer suggests that the grease be replaced once per year. Failure to do this can result in the risk of accelerated wear and tear on the propeller parts and possible stickiness in the event that you want to feather when you disengage the transmission. What is needed to grease your own prop? Well, you'll need a grease gun with a Zerk fitting end, the appropriate sized grease tube of Lubriplate number 130AA. This tube must have threads on the end which can be screwed to the grease gun, and a properly sized Zerk fitting that you'll be screwing into a port that you open up, which currently would have a set screw in it. Having a few extra set screws wouldn't hurt either. Okay, first step is we're going to withdraw one of the 2 set screws in these ports. This is port 1, port 2 we'll call it. I am using a Allen wrench that came with a kit from PYI to maintain the grease, but it is basically a 3mm Allen wrench. You can see that set screw is coming out. I can just finish off pulling that off here, and I would guess that I might see a little grease come out of that port. Maybe, maybe not. Here's the grease gun. We're going to put a Zerk plug in there, just like that. That is a Zerk plug. Mind you, I've had a little bit of practice on this procedure at this point, properly doing this so I could present it to you, my YouTube followers. And now we have a tube of grease. This is the recommended manufacturer's grease. I've got a second tube here, and I'm going to try to use the older one. I think this is the older one. It's actually fuller. So I'm going to try using what I can out of this tube. See if I can't, first in, first out. Get the right concept. And that is screwing on okay, so that's good. Okay, this gun needs a fitting here. This is the Zerk fitting end, which allows you to snap it on. I first tried this and I inserted this onto the Zerk fitting dry with no grease in it, and I had a horrible time trying to bring this end back off of that Zerk fitting. It wouldn't come off. And I thought, man, I really screwed something up. This is old. I'm not sure what I'm doing. It just turned out that it just needed a little grease to go through it. And then everything snapped on, snapped off just fine. Okay. Now when I pump, I'm getting no grease. I feel no pressure. I can tell that all I'm doing is pumping air. But now I'm going to prime the pump. I'm going to push grease into the gun from down here, and I should be able to ultimately, here, I'm going to pulled up the bottom, I should be able to get grease in there. And I'll tell you, still nothing happening here. So let's take this off. Let's see if I can push grease out of here like so. Yeah. So something is amiss. I've got a second gun here I can try. Here's gun number 2. And I do like to double up on things because I'll tell you what, when it comes down to you're not sure what's going on, the investment of having extra parts and tools is a worthwhile investment compared to the amount of time you're spending scratching your head with just one tool going, why isn't this working properly? You know, you can just swap something out and see if it works that way. And I'll be darned that if most times that works to my advantage. Okay, so I'm going to switch this nozzle out as well. And I've got a different nozzle too, so if this doesn't work, I'll just try pulling on a different nozzle. And we'll throw it on there again. Okay, that's snapped in. Okay, and now we'll just push on this grease, see if we can prime it. Boy, that just does not want to go. Do not feel any grease going, which is not great. Here it goes. You know what? Feel a little something. Still nothing. Okay. So something's still amiss. I will try this other tube and I'll show you that this tube, see this tube, I cut flush the nipple that was on there, and you can see that I left a little bit of the excess nipple on that tube. This tube I cut pretty much flush. This tube I did not. There's a little extra nipple on there. So I'm gonna try pushing this in here and see if, you know, maybe that is the difference. That older tube I have not had good luck on. One reason why this tube looks more used is because I had this exact same problem the last time I was trying to do this. Okay, now we're going to push the grease. We're going to prime it. Oh, okay, I think this is going to work. Yep, you can see grease coming out of that end. I can feel the grease going in. So the way I cut that tube, whatever the reason, whether I cut that nipple in a way that makes it so that the suction doesn't come through or what, I just did something wrong there. So a second gun later, a second tube later, a second fitting later, the whole kit really, I just replaced. Now you can see as I'm pumping, look, here, there's grease spilling out, right? So now we are going to get a little paper towel. This is like an exit port for that grease. Remember, this is our second insert port. And you can see this guy's coming out. And now, I'll tell you, I did do a number of pumps there. Really, the manual says pump a couple times and then work the mechanism. So work it in. So I did a few more pumps than I probably should have there to get things moving. And you can see things working through. Now I'm going to pull off this plug, and hopefully I don't lose too much of the new grease in the process. I certainly forced new grease in there enough. Now we're going to immediately throw, there, see? Now we're going to immediately throw the set screw in here to try to plug it up. Oop. There we are. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast, right? Sometimes if you try to rush something, it just doesn't work properly. So here we go. This guy's going back in. properly set. There's a little more grease coming out of the exit port here. Fine. Now we're going to do the same thing over here. Here's the second set screw, second grease port. We're going to open that up. Having a hard time getting the wrench in there. Let me make sure I just turn this one more time. Tighten, that's right. There we go. Okay. There we are. Lefty loosey. Here comes the port. Set screws coming out. One thing you want to have handy when you're doing this is paper towels, because you're going to be, you know, basically forcing old grease out as you're putting new grease in. Okay. Again, best you just not try to rush or get excited or try to push things along too fast, because really it's just slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And yes, I stole that from a popular TV series called Modern Family. All right, here we go again. From the main character, Phil. Okay, here we go. I definitely feel grease going through there. And now I'll do what you should do, is work the mechanism immediately after a couple pumps. Make sure it's working in there. 2, 3, 4. There's 4 more pumps. Again, I'll make sure I work it. I can see a little bit of grease coming out of that exit port right here. Yeah, right there. So, yeah. I'm starting to see grease come through actually, right? There's 4 more pumps. And I am being a little liberal in pushing grease through, because again, it's been so long since I've owned the prop and not done this. And one other thing I could do to make amends is to actually pull this housing off, pull the whole prop off, and disassemble it and degrease it, right? Basically throw it all into a solvent, get the grease out, completely degrease the system, make it nice and clean, and then reassemble it and reinstall it. So if I really wanted to do the right thing, that's probably what I would do. But I'm still getting used to just what do I need to do to maintain the thing, which is why I invited you here today to join me, so we can learn the steps. And this, my friends, is it. Okay, so now we're gonna take off that Zerk fitting. We can anticipate that we'll probably see a little more excess grease come out of it. The manual says, the instructions say, basically put enough grease in there where you see grease coming out of these seams, and that's all you have to do. Again, you want to do that every year. And as I said, I'm putting more than normal because I didn't do it every year. I did it after 3 years or 4 years. I'm not sure what it is exactly. Okay, yeah, a little more grease coming out the new side. And we're going to wipe that off and try to save as much of it as we can. Still in the housing. No, okay, here we go. I got the screws threaded, and in goes this set screw into the body. And that's it. That is adding new grease into the system. And I guess I really want to reinforce that point, because I can't get grease out of this tube for some reason. but I can get grease out of the tube that I did. And this tube, again, I cut the nipple flush, right? And it seems like that's a problem of some sort. So I'm not sure how I'm gonna address that, but it's easy enough to get grease out of that other tube. And sometimes it's just good to double up on all your tools, all your spares, all your parts, because if you don't, you can't try different things out with different combinations, especially when you're doing something new. So for lessons learned, let's start with the grease tube. Procure the grease that the manufacturer recommends, because in this process, you're just adding grease to an existing amount of grease already in the prop. So you want to match the grease. You're not disassembling the prop and degreasing the prop and completely replacing the grease and reassembling and putting everything back together. You are just adding grease to the existing grease. So you want to match the grease that's inside there. When you unscrew the cap of the grease tube, you will notice an elongated nipple. I've already cut this one off. In order to fit the tube of grease to properly screw onto the grease gun receptacle, the nipple will have to be cut almost down flush, but not quite flush. Leave a little bit of that nipple left. Lesson number 2. On the propeller, you will usually find 2 or more ports to install the grease. These ports are drilled into the prop housing, are protected with set screws, and may or may not be labeled. In my case, one of the ports is labeled. The other one is not. You are meant to only remove the set screw on one grease port at a time. Install a Zerk fitting into that open port and then proceed to add grease. Removing 2 or more set screws will result in grease prematurely escaping from the chamber housing through the open ports. Lesson number 3, the plug screwed into the open port that the grease gun is meant to attach to is called a Zerk fitting. I was not familiar with this term until going through this procedure, and it's always good to know the name of an item before you attempt to procure it and use it for your own personal use and your maintenance of the boat. PYI Incorporated sells kits comprised of solely Zerk fittings and set screws, or more complete kits inclusive of a tube of grease, appropriate sized Allen wrench, and a grease gun as well as the fitting. Lesson number 4. When looking at a grease gun, one would expect that working it would be very straightforward. But trust me to make the simple complicated. When first attempting to understand how this gun worked, I attached the gun to the Zerk fitting before attaching a grease tube to verify that the gun would work. It snapped on no problem to the fitting end, but subsequently trying to detach this fitting from this gun was a problem. It was only after I added some grease to the system that I was able to detach the fitting from the end by just putting a little tension on this at an angle. The grease was the key to removing it. Next, after putting all the parts together for the grease gun, I was able to squeeze a small amount of grease through the gun. But subsequent pumps would not pump more grease. And this was unsettling to me. I was flabbergasted, annoyed, you name it. It was just befuddling to me. So I decided to put a pause, and I went home. I bought a whole nother kit because the gun that I had was about 3 years old. I inherited it. I just wasn't sure I had all the right parts, everything in place. I found in the past that an investment in tools and parts is generally less expensive than the time spent when taking on a new task. On the following visit, I again had trouble pushing grease through the gun until I finally decided to try squeezing the grease tube from the bottom to prime the grease into the gun, and lo and behold, I was able to produce grease on demand from that point forward. This is just a cost of getting familiar with a new device or a new procedure. It is relatively easy to get a simple thing wrong and second guess. Extra time and energy is required, but I have to emphasize that this effort is worth it for you. You become more familiar with your systems and more competent in the maintenance and more proficient when faced with issues. Most sailors I know relish a move toward more self-sufficiency, and efforts like this are a vital part of that evolution. Lesson number 5. How to know when you have completed a job? After successfully pumping grease into the Zerk fitting, I soon saw what one is expected to see: excess grease pouring out of the seams and spaces surrounding the moving parts. The unexpected part for me is how dirty the grease looked as it came out. I continued to push grease through with the expectation of the grease eventually looking cleaner. I think my particular experience was a bit self-inflicted. I have not taken the initiative to replace the grease in the prop until this year. And I believe I've owned the prop for at least 3 years. The manufacturer suggests replacing the grease every year. So I have to imagine that the dirtiness of the grease is partially, is a result of me waiting longer than needed to do this first grease replacement. A little note about me, I am doing a final studying push before taking the ABYC standard certification exam. I plan to do that within the next, I'd say 3 weeks. I plan to release a video soon on what the ABYC standard certification is and why it carries importance. I really want to thank my subscribers. I appreciate your support. If you have stayed to the end of this video, I'd really appreciate it if you'd press that like button. That helps the channel grow. This is Sailor Eric. Thanks for watching.